Thanks, Greg, and thanks everybody for making it over here. I know this isn't everybody's favorite subject, challenging conversations, right? That dreaded, like we need to talk text, or that performance review that nobody wants to be in. But the truth is, there's a lot we can do to get better at these conversations, and there's some really simple steps that we're going to talk about together today that I've seen in my work. I do leadership development coaching, purpose alignment coaching, and I help teams get more effective at resolving conflict and building inclusive cultures. And so I do this work in a number of different contexts with organizations and individuals, and I'll share some of the stories about what I've seen work well for the people that I'm supporting with this already. But we're going to talk about ways to seek connection in conflict and really find common ground. Like, where is that shared area in an interaction that we want to move towards in a relationship? And all of these practices are really rooted in self-awareness, because our primary relationship is our relationship with ourselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about, at the beginning, about these practices of authentic relating. They're these really useful and simple tools to help us get better at self-awareness so we can get better at supporting our teams, our spouses, our friends in every interaction. There will be some guidelines, right? You guys have it on the cue cards if you literally want to walk into that conversation with a script so you feel like I have an anchor for it. I've given you that to take home. And we're actually going to get to practice some of this stuff. So you're not just going to listen to me ramble for 45 minutes. You guys are going to actually have a chance towards the end to try this out. So really prepare to play, prepare to bring some examples and get engaged with this. And ideally, nothing I'm going to share with you today should be entirely new. We've all had conversations before. The ways that people have been interacting and learning how to manage challenging interactions has been around for a while. So what I really want to invite you to do in this workshop is to think about the ways that some of this stuff might already be true for you in your life, or think about some examples of where this stuff might already apply. And this isn't just for professional contexts. These tools are useful in every human relationship. So think about, how can I use this to be a better spouse, or a better son or daughter, or a better friend, right? So a lot of really rich examples from our personal lives can support us in a business context as well. So these 5 practices of authentic relating are really the foundation of this process. Again, none of this should look totally novel, but we'll give a little bit of color to what each of these mean. The first is to welcome everything. The second is to assume nothing. The third is to reveal your experience. The fourth is to own your experience. And the fifth is honor self and other. So what do we mean by these? The first is welcome everything. I often get feedback on this of like, oh, what do you mean? I just have to like be cool with it? Is this just like the groovy vibe, putting on the smile and just getting by? That's not what we mean at all. What we mean is that we're just with that experience without being pulled into it. So instead of saying, I'm angry with you right now, you could say, I feel angry when you cut me off before I finish talking, right? So just creating that space between yourself and your emotions is enough room to kind of create choice in a difficult interaction. So we're really working to be able to respond from choice instead of reacting with that knee-jerk trigger. And we're looking to what I call widen the window. I got this concept from Elizabeth Stanley. She's a trauma researcher that works with veterans and people with PTSD. And we all have a window of tolerance between like our fight response and flight, right? And that's what we want to be. And when we're able to welcome everything, we're able to cultivate that equanimity and presence of like, all right, cool, I don't like this, but I'm still here for it. I'm letting it happen, and I'm staying present and outside of my zone of trigger in an interaction. The second, assume nothing, I think is a bit of a misnomer. I think it just looks cute, like welcome everything, assume nothing, right? But it's not actually possible to do this, ever. We're always bringing our stories, our judgments, our previous experiences, our biases into every interaction. And so what we really want to work to do is notice, name, and drop those stories, right? So we might say, well, the last person we hired for this job was like terrible at it, so we just gotta like micromanage this person, right? And you're carrying that previous stress into the present interaction and not letting that person thrive. Right? Or you might say like, well, you were late last Tuesday, so now I'm going to be all up on you and like, where are you right now? Right? So every interaction we have, we carry those previous experiences with us. And are we willing to slow down with them, get curious what's happening, and name that story, right? I have a story that you're not listening to me. I have a story that you just don't value my opinion because you always talk over me, right? So like, these are ideas and projections we have about people, and part of it might be based in their actual behavior. But ultimately, if we've cast them in that role, then we're letting that assumption run the show. And that's what we really want to get careful to notice. And some of these little sentence stems can help us tease out what's an assumption and what's actually true in an interaction. Reveal your experience doesn't mean that we're telling everybody what we're thinking all the time. This isn't like the vulnerability Olympics, right? Where we're just constantly telling everybody what's on our mind. I don't recommend that. I don't think it's going to work as a relational strategy. But what we mean here is that we're checking in with ourselves, that we're present to our own experience and we're noticing what's arising in response to a situation that we're in. So we might say to ourselves, I'm really, really annoyed with what you just said, but part of me is curious that I might have misunderstood you, or that I might have something to learn from our disagreement. Can I lean into that curious part, right? Can I step towards that part of my experience that's building the relationship instead of the part that's feeling more angry? So we want to be really honest with it too, to be able to say, you know what, my kiddo was sick last night, I just was up all night, I didn't get enough sleep, like I'm showing up with less than my best right now. Do we feel safe to say that in an interaction so we can be met by that other person? Because ultimately when we reveal ourselves, we give the other person's assumptions less space to run the interaction and invite them to step towards us and kind of we're giving space for our experience, that gives them permission to share theirs. So that can help us find that common ground. And when we describe it, sometimes that just processes it. Have you ever had a difficult emotion and you just name it and it helps kind of burn it off a little bit? That's a great practice to be in. And when we reveal, we want to make sure it's with 100% owned language. And so, that's the wrong way. Here we go. Owning your experience. Who in here is familiar with nonviolent communication? Has anybody heard of that? So you guys know about I statements? Yeah, so I statements get you part of the way there. But if you say something like, I feel like you never listened to me, right? It's like, you can hear the judgment in that, right? You can hear the projection, you can hear the blame. So when we're owning our experience, we want to speak unarguably about what's happening for us. So instead of saying, I feel like you never listened to me, I might say something like, I feel unheard when you cut me off before I finish talking. I feel unheard, right? So I'm not saying you always or you never, I'm not making it about you. And you can't argue with the fact that I feel unheard in this moment, right? So I'm speaking from my experience. I'm letting you know what's going on, but I'm doing it in a way that's not projecting blame onto you. It's just revealing what's happening so you can relate to it more effectively. And again, we want to really work on that responding versus reacting. A really wise teacher I had said, you should center yourself so you don't center yourself. Meaning if you're centered, if you're grounded, if you're balanced, you don't need to put your experience at the center of the interaction. And you can make room for the other person. And your emotions and your assumptions aren't going to run the show. So can you slow down and center yourself so you have that choice in your response? And I think this is kind of corny but really funny. Responsibility is your responsibility. Right? So that is your responsibility in every moment. You can't control what happens to you. You can't control what the world does. You can't control how terrible other people are. But you can control how you respond to it. So that is your responsibility in every interaction, is to really build that ability to respond. And ultimately, anything that we are blaming in our lives, we're giving our power to. Right? We're blaming our bad boss or the economy or whatever, COVID. It's like you are giving your power over to that thing in that moment to control your reaction. And so just watch for what you're blaming. And can you take a little bit of your power back from that thing you're blaming by owning your experience a little bit deeper? So that's the invitation of this practice. And then the fifth one, honor self and other. I like to say this is like the rug in the Big Lebowski. It really ties the room together. This is where all of these practices meet in one place. And honoring ourselves means that we're aware of what's arising, right? We're connected with that experience, we're revealed in it, and we're aware of what we need in honoring our boundaries. Honoring other means we're able to bring our curiosity, right? To be able to step out of those assumptions, to offer that person the gift of our attention in that moment and check out kind of what's going on for them. And we need to know the difference, right, between what's ours and what's theirs. We don't want to be taking ownership of everybody else's things for them, right? Especially as leaders or parents or community members or empathetic people, we tend to take on a lot of other people's stuff. That's not what we mean here, right? We really want to be clear on that ownership piece and be able to say, nope, I'm in choice with this. That's yours, this is mine. And what's needed here is a great question that does both honor self and honor other at one time. So we can always ask, what's needed here? So what do I need? What do you need? Do those needs meet in the middle? Can we start to map that Venn diagram? right? So just bringing that question to an interaction can really help us get clear, both for ourselves and for others, how to make an interaction work better. And who here's heard of the golden rule? Show of hands, anybody heard of the golden rule? Anybody heard of the platinum rule? All right, I see you out there. So the golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated. But what if you love vanilla ice cream and I'm allergic to vanilla, right? So you buy me 5 gallons of vanilla ice cream as an apology and I can't even eat it, right? So the platinum rule is treat others as they want to be treated, which is a much more effective way to serve others in relationship. Because our tendency is typically to give people what we want to get when we're hurt or upset. So that's our default response, is do for others what we want. But ultimately, that might not be what they need. So in order to honor others more effectively, we need to slow down and ask that question and find out what is the platinum rule, what's needed here, what do they need?
How do we draw the line between people pleasing and honoring others' needs?
That's a great question. So that has to do with knowing your boundaries and knowing where you're stepping too far, right? And so I struggle with that too as an empathetic person. It's like I'm always trying to serve others, but you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you can't meet your needs in a relationship, you'll feel resentful of other people who ask for theirs to be met. So that's a whole different, deeper conversation, but I'm glad you asked that because it does come up a lot. And I see that a lot with my one-on-one clients. I coach a lot of leaders, and they're often always fixing things for their teams or trying to get the problems out of the way. And they're actually creating a culture of dependence and weakness in their team where it stifles innovation because they're just like, oh, well, Gabe will fix it, right? Which can ultimately, in the long run, really hurt us. So we want to watch out for that. Thanks for bringing it up. And so I have a lot to cover. I see some questions bubbling up. I'll pause in just a minute. Actually, you want to pause right now? We're going to talk about these 5 practices. So are there quick questions or comments on this before we move forward? I saw you with the yellow glasses. Look like you're about to say something. No? Okay. Cool. Well, I actually have a question for y'all. Which of these is the most challenging? So show of hands for welcome everything. People who just really struggle to be present with the moment or feel a lot of resistance to what's happening, right? Cool, me too. What about people who assume nothing? People who get lost in those stories or have a really hard time with biases and judgments. What about people who really struggle to reveal their experience? I don't expect you to raise your hand right now, but silently. Maybe silently in your head. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just it's really hard for me to ask her what I need or say how I feel, right? What about people who struggle with ownership? People are constantly looking for someone to blame or really find themselves in that victim role. Not common in the entrepreneur community, good to see. And what about people who feel like it's really tough to honor self and other, to find that balance, like you said, or really maybe over or under serving in relationship? Yeah, so like I said, none of this stuff is new, right? We all have our own story with these experiences. They're really, really common. And what I find value in this, and what my clients have really gotten a lot of benefit from, is it just gives a vocabulary to stuff that we're already experiencing, so it makes it workable, right? What gets measured gets managed. And so without a way to describe what's happening, we often struggle to find those footholds in a challenging interaction or to change a pattern of behavior. And why I love these practices so much is they give really simple language to common human experiences to make those interactions more navigable and easier in the future. And I want you to remember which one you raised your hand for. Because my invitation to you is that you'll take that forward as your commitment for practice for the week ahead. So if you said, I'm really bad at assuming nothing, I commit to the next week question my assumptions. Or if I said I'm really bad at honoring self and other, I'm going to spend the next week really curious about my boundaries in these key relationships. So I really want to ask you guys to take that forward. And nobody loves conflict, right? I've never met anybody, except maybe the SVP of HR, who's like, yeah, let's do this, right? Nobody else I've ever talked to about these workshops is like, I'm so jazzed for this conversation. But there's actually really good reasons to embrace conflict. These are 4 of them that I've encountered in my work with teams. The first is teamwork. There's deeper trust with people that you've been through it with, right? So have you ever been on a really challenging vacation where all your camping gear got washed down the river, or you spent that really difficult Christmas with the in-laws? It's how did you feel about the people you went through that with afterwards, right? There was this sense of camaraderie or connection after that experience, right? So there's trust built in difficult interactions. We also have clarity. We don't know people's boundaries often, right? They're not always telling us exactly where their sensitive spots are. And sometimes we need to push up against them to really understand what people value, what they'll take a stand for in a relationship. So it's important to explore that depth to really get good at supporting one another because we know where those soft spots are. There's also connection, a depth of understanding. I think of the scene in The Matrix where there's a guardian angel for the Oracle, and he fights Neo, and at the end he was like, why did you fight me? You always knew I was the one. And the Oracle says, well, you never really know someone until you fight them. And I kind of think that's true. And I find that there's a lack of trust from me and my nervous system when somebody's like dodging the issue or not willing to get into it. I'm kind of like, what are you hiding? What's up, right? So like there's a deeper connection when you're willing to just kind of face it directly, right? We've all kind of felt somebody who's resisting this, and it doesn't create trust. And the final piece is around creativity. So we hear a lot of talk these days about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what I often see that look like inside of organizations I work with is like, let's get a bunch of people who look different in the same room and then force them to think and talk and act the same way. It's not diversity at all. And what diversity really means is that we have a plurality of thought, that we have a culture of trust and psychological safety where we can speak truth to power, where we can embrace dissonance and difference as a resource on our team, right? Where we can really create from this different ways of seeing things and solving problems. But if we're not skilled at conflict and we're not comfortable with that dissonance and disagreement, we will never welcome that resource. And we won't be able to create from that space. So let's get into the actual practices that are on your cards here. This is the giving and receiving feedback model. Do nothing, completely listen, reflect what you heard, take ownership, and share impact. So this is what we can do when someone's coming at us with a challenging interaction. Ideally that we've planned, maybe we didn't, right? The first one, do nothing. Just take a breath. Don't jump in and react right away. Just welcome it, maintain your center, just be here with it and receive it, instead of just like jumping into fix it mode. And my friend was once really upset with me. She actually said that. She said, don't just do something, stand there. Right? What she meant to say was don't just stand there, do something. But that's often what we do. And I think there's actually wisdom in this. We don't need to just do something. We can just stand there and maybe welcome that discomfort for a moment. The second, completely listen. So I've heard people say that most folks aren't actually listening, they're just waiting to talk. And who's had that experience, right? When somebody's just got that like clever rebuttal like in the chamber, that's not what we want to do. So don't fire back with your reason you're right or your perspective. Ask a question instead. Say, hey, is there more? Did I get all that? Is there anything I was missing? Right? And they're immediately going to be like, oh my gosh, wait, what? Yeah, you're listening to me right now. You can see the look on their face when you're actually hearing them. So ask for a little more information. Maybe they'll tell you something important that they felt a little bit unsafe to say before. Oops, oh my. Reflect back what you heard. And so for this one, it's important that we actually use the tone words and mirror some of the speech of the person that we're listening to. So if you said to me, I was angry on Friday when you talked over me in front of the client. I don't want to reflect back. Yeah, so I heard you were kind of pissed last week when I didn't let you finish your sentence. Right? So that's my interpretation. I would want to say, hey, I heard you say last Friday in that client meeting, you were angry when I talked over you. Did I get that right? So just using the words that they use, the key pieces of what they said, to confirm with that person, hey, I heard you, I got you. And permission to get it wrong. That clarifying question, did I get that right? They might be like, actually, no, what I said was X or Y. And that might be the thing you really needed to hear. So this can be a really important step to clean those assumptions out of your conversation as you move forward, to make sure that you're each understanding the important pieces of the interactions. The fourth one, take ownership. So this one can be tough, especially for the martyrs in the room, right? The people who always want to like make it okay or admit that they were wrong. That's not what we mean by this. We really want to balance those boundaries with curiosities and be really clear with what's yours and mine, right? So we're not taking on stuff that isn't ours. We're just curious and open to learning something in the interaction. So be willing to see something you didn't see before. Oh, in hearing that you felt unheard in that interaction, I realized I could do a better job of paying attention to your facial expressions or what you agreed to say in the meeting. I agreed that I can listen for that balance, right? Or in hearing that, you felt I was late for dinner, I now recognize like time maybe is a key value for you, and I can work on being more punctual. Right? So I'm not like offering an apology or anything. I'm just saying, oh, I understand this thing about you now, and I can agree to work towards that in the relationship. So that's what we mean by taking ownership, just hearing and learning something new. And taking responsibility for that response. Again, trying not to be projecty or judgy or blamey in there. And even if it isn't your fault, it is your responsibility in that relationship to work to find some way forward. I like to say a really healthy relationship is 200% responsible, where both parties are willing to be 100% responsible. Because if they're not, somebody's always competing to be the bigger victim. Somebody's always competing to be right. So can we really be the bigger person there and work to learn something? I'm really getting a hard time with these buttons. The fifth one, share impact. So the person who's giving you feedback might not be ready for this, right? This is an optional step. You have to get consent. Are you open to hearing from me? Do you want to know what that's like for me to hear? Are you open to my perspective on that? Do you want to hear how I remembered that moment? Because maybe it's different than what they said, right? So you just really want to check in with them, own your experience, clean up any judgments that might be arising, and you can use some of these sentences. And I kind of gave them in the previous example. Like, here's some things I learned. Here's some things I heard. Did I get that right? So it's just sharing impact from your side. And these don't all have to happen in order, right? They might happen at different points in the conversation. But each of these is like a toehold for you to grab onto when you feel things really kind of like the mercury rising or the anger coming up. You can use any of these to try to balance the conversation. So this is the receiving side, relational Aikido. And Aikido, forgot to mention at the beginning, is this martial art where you're trying to disarm your opponent without causing harm. And so that's what these steps of a challenging conversation are designed to do too. They're designed to slow things down, disarm, without causing harm. Giving side, relational alchemy. So turning a challenging situation into something valuable. And I actually keep this with you on my desk at home. This is a fossilized sloth turd to remind me that there is value in every situation, because I literally paid money for feces once. So you can create value from anything. And that's what these skills are designed to help us do. And I hate to say if you should only take one thing away from this workshop, it's this, but it honestly might be that important. When you're going into a challenging interaction, you really want to center the relationship and the shared goals as the reason why you're having the conversation. So the why before the what. The content, the why is like your issue, like why you're upset or what's wrong. But really what we want to lead with is the shared goals and the connection in the relationship. Say, hey, I really want to get better at how we meet our deliverables for our clients. And I need to talk to you about a logistics issue. Or hey, I really want to make our marriage feel more loving and supportive. And I need to talk to you about how we handle communication, right? I want to be a better friend, a better sister, a better whatever, right? Sharing that shared goal that you know that person has in the relationship, whether it's a team objective or something they care about in the connection, you want to lead with that as the reason why you're having the difficult conversation. Coming back to those reasons for conflict, right? Instead of saying, I'm really mad with you and I want to get something off my chest. It's like, right? But hey, I want to be a better friend to you. I'm like, okay, me too. What do we need, right? So you were helping that person lean in a little bit more. Setting the context. So this is just an agenda for the meeting, basically, right? Not going to open Pandora's box. Everybody's worried that I don't have time for this huge can of worms because I know there's a lot of challenge in our relationship. Can we just set some guardrails to say, hey, I want to get better at meeting our deadlines, and I need to talk about how we handle communications with vendors. You know what I mean? I've noticed some dropped balls, right? So I'm setting that scope. I'm not saying, I want to talk to you about how lazy and inefficient you are or how we're always missing marks. I'm saying, hey, here's a specific issue. Do we have time for that? Right? So just creating some boundaries in the conversation, the end goal of that interaction. And getting consent. Really easy to do, but often overlooked. Do you have time for this? When can we talk about this? How much bandwidth do you have? Right? Are you fully available without distractions for this interaction? And if they don't, that's okay. Just set a time to do it. Say, all right, cool. Could we meet Friday afternoon? I'm free at 10 a.m. Just get that on the calendar when you both have agreed and consented to having this interaction. Because ultimately, if we're learning someone's boundaries, we're building a relationship with them. But if we're crossing them and just our emotions are too hot, we're pushing over those boundaries, we're going to shut them down. So we really want to slow down and make sure that we're both available for the conversation. And also that the consent is ongoing, right? So somebody's hearing from us really difficult things to hear. We say, hey, are you open to more? Are we at capacity right now, right? Where are you? Just checking in with them as you go. Sharing the content. This is everybody's favorite part. You get to say your piece now, right? So here you get to be specific with the issue that you're bringing up. But with the teams and organizations I work in, it's really important that this impact and incident formula is one of the most effective tools that I've seen to really create good feedback and make sharing of challenging information easier. So you could say, on Friday, when you spoke over me in the client meeting, I felt unheard, right? So that's on Friday, this thing happened. Instead of saying, you're always trying to under me in this organization, you don't value my ideas, and you make me look bad, right? Those are you always, you never kind of things. We don't want to do that. We want to be as specific as we can. When this happened, this is how it felt, right? So we really want to be in ownership when we reveal that experience. We really want to be super clear about when this happened, unarguable and without judgment. And keep it specific. And try to ask every time you share a piece of difficult information or every time you use this incident and impact formula, go to step number 5. Check in. What's that like to hear? What was your perspective on that? What's coming up for you? Right? So we really want to check in with the person that we're speaking to, one issue at a time. So we're not steamrolling them and we're letting them know that they still have space to show up in this interaction, right? That they can still talk to us and provide their perspective. That this isn't a one-way street. So we're making room for them to share their perspective with us as well. So this is not an optional step when you're giving feedback or giving a difficult interaction. You really want to check it. What's coming up for you? You know, how does this land? Right? Just really giving them room to share that experience. So this is the alchemy side. Why before what? Set your context, your agenda, get clear consent, share your content as specific as you can, incident and impact formula, and then check for impact. What's that like to hear? And you can honestly do it like boom, boom, boom. I mean, this happens in one sentence, right? Like, hey, I really care about our team's performance. I want to talk to you about a communications issue. Are you available for that? On Friday, this happened. What's that like to hear? Right? So that's all 5 steps in one sentence, basically. So you can get good at this over time as you practice, which you're going to do in a minute, to really make sure that you're following these steps to create space in the interaction. But it might still go off the rails. So there's a few things we can do. Even if we get everything right, and we're following our script and we're bringing our best energy to the interaction, it may still get heated, right? So the first thing we can do, 4 magic words. Can anybody guess what they might be? No? Okay, that's fine. Can we slow down? You always have permission to slow the interaction down. You can always ask for a little bit of breathing room. Okay, you know, the mercury's rising right now. I notice we're kind of getting heated here. You just take a breath, step back. Okay, cool. I'm gonna grab a cup of water. I'll be right back. Just need a minute to clear my head. You can always ask for this. And I often ask for people, like I do these a lot of times on teams, and it's like just like the directors or something in the room, and they're like, well, what do I do with my employees? They haven't been to wizard school, right? So like, how do they know what to do, right? We can be the leaders in the interaction to kind of guide the process. And the energy we're bringing, people want to match us as much as possible. So where our nervous systems are designed to co-regulate. So if we're bringing like calm, balanced, available, safe energy to an interaction, that person's nervous system is naturally going to want to move towards that in us, instead of like if we're bringing all this like hot, angry, like assumption, judgment stuff, they're going to want to defend themselves and kind of ramp up to meet us. So slowing things down allows us to stay in that center of dignity so we can be the kind of balancing force in the interaction. And if that doesn't work, there's a few more steps too. And these are on the back of your card. So that first one is the same, just trying to slow things down. The second one, center yourself. Really finding that center of gravity. For me, it's like right here, it's like in my belly. I just like notice where's my attention going? Am I like pulled up into my thoughts? Am I pulled down into this calmer space where I have more resources available? Just take a breath. Make sure you're coming from that place where you're honoring your boundaries and your inner dignity, but you still have access to your curiosity as well. And then come back to those shared goals, reminding folks, hey, we wanted to have this conversation so we could get better at this thing that we both care about, right? We both care about our marriage, we both care about our business, we both care about our outcomes, right? Remind that person, this is why we're here. Can we keep this shared goal in mind? This is feel like it's getting petty or bitter. I want to bring us back to this place of mutuality right now. And staying focused on the original context. So maybe we're kind of opening up Pandora's box and it's feeling like we're bringing in a lot of things that weren't part of the original context. It's like, hey, we agreed to talk about logistics, now we're talking about communications, and now we're talking about money, and it's just like not part of what we agreed to discuss. Can we just come back to the thing that we wanted to do this one step at a time? We can make space for those other issues later. I hear that they're important to you. I want to keep us focused on this one thing. So just using that context and coming back to that. And agreeing to pause. Like, it's okay if it doesn't complete the cycle. It's okay if you don't get to check the box and have this be a done issue. If both of you are flooded, or if the room is just kind of getting into this he said, she said, or a competition to be more right, you need to call timeout. And like, we gotta reschedule this. We gotta come back to this when we have more resources available. Let's harvest what we can from where we got and agree to continue later. Because it doesn't serve anybody to just continue to plow through it when people are not present and available for actually solving the problem. So that isn't a failure at all. It's totally okay to say, hey, we gotta come back to this. I don't think we're getting it right now. So when it goes off the rails, we can do these 5 things to try to guide it back, or just kind of close up if you need to. So who's ready to practice with this? I'll give you guys about 15 minutes where we have space in this room now. I said this is going to give you a chance to practice challenging conversations so you can make the next one easy. Because ultimately, we benefit from repetition, right? We got to give this a bit of a dress rehearsal. And so I have a few scenarios for you guys. You could either have scenario A, your coworker's missing deadlines. You know, we got to kind of improve performance. Scenario B, your partner doesn't listen to you, you feel unheard in your relationship. That's the challenge you're trying to address. Or scenario C, for the brave ones in the room who actually want to role play a real interaction, you'll have a chance to give a bit of a context setting to the person next to you so they can kind of act out that role. And you have on your cards the steps of the interaction that you're going to follow, and I'll leave them up here for you. But just turn to someone near you. Not going to guys make you pick a partner or anything, just like literally turn to someone you can have this conversation with. And for the next 10 minutes, you guys will have a chance to walk through these and get a chance to feel what it's like to try these on in an interaction. And this is how I run these for teams. It's like most of the time we're actually in breakouts and in dialogues, exploring this stuff, doing some exercises around it. Unfortunately, we don't have more time, or I'd love to play some of these. I call them authentic relating games. There's lots of cool little tools we can use to kind of get into this. For now, we're just going to do the dialogue. But before we go to breakout, right? I'm used to clicking the button on Zoom. Did you hear my brain do the autopilot there? Do you guys have any questions about any of this? Yeah.
So when you mentioned ownership, you said that's a way that you can avoid apologizing. I mean, that wasn't your specific word choice, but
yeah.
That's what I heard. So, like, where does apologizing actually fit into this? Or do you think that it's important to hold off on that?
No, ownership can be an apology.
Okay.
And I really appreciate you saying that, because I didn't want to give the impression that it's meant to avoid apology. I think I was kind of riding off of your reflection earlier, and my tendency as well to like apologize too much or own too much. And I think as like with people with generous hearts who are kind of trying to repair a relationship, that tends to be the easier way out, is to just like, I'll just fix it and make it okay. And so I tend to underscore that and that's typically the role that leaders are in. Like they're the ones who are responsible, so they're constantly trying to like take stuff on for their team. And so I try to overcorrect to say like, you don't have to apologize when you take ownership. But yes, an apology fits beautifully into the ownership part. I'm really sorry that you felt like unheard by me. That's not my intent at all. Like, I'm really sorry that you felt like I made you look bad in front of that client. I didn't want to do that, right? So that's a great moment to say I'm sorry, and thank you for bringing that.
Thanks.
Any other question?
Well, and I started to encroach on the role-playing time. That following up on that, in my opinion, and let me know what you think. An authentic apology is taking ownership with specificity, as opposed to saying, I'm sorry you took it the wrong way, or I'm sorry you feel that can be patronizing and defending one's own ego.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
And I did use that language, you're right, and that's not really the best way to do it. I think a better way to do it would be like, I'm sorry that happened, right? I'm sorry that on Friday I cut you off. I'm sorry I'm sorry I made you look bad. You know what I mean? Like, you can't deny that's what happened, right? So, yeah.
That's the honoring of the other parties.
Exactly.
Kind of
You're validating their experience. It's like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, right? That's not an apology at all. Did you have one more question?
I was just going to say that saying I'm sorry and keeping it big picture general does not do to me the job. You need to be specific. Other person had the courage to tell you. I think you need to have the courage back to say, I'm really sorry.
That's
I
right.
broke your vase. I know it was your favorite.
Yeah, I hear this
To
is
me,
important too.
It's a kind of a heart-to-heart building experience.
I agree.
In both ways.
I agree. And so, when you structure that apology, make sure you're making that apology relevant to the thing that they shared,
Absolutely.
right? That incident and impact, that you're coming back to that moment with them. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, I wish we had more time, but I'd love to give you guys a chance to practice before we wrap up. So with the time we have left, you have one more? Okay.
One thing that I kept restraining myself from saying to you is that this whole thing is so vulnerable for all of us. However, I just feel like one of the things that I'm not so sure it's not here is the biggest part to me is to be able to hear the person and say their issue number one or whatever it is, and be able to let the other person respond to that, so we can build, over, teamwork instead of just one just dominates and says it all out, and then you run out of time, they're both tired now, the other one doesn't have to say a thing. You know what I'm saying? Just going out of control.
Yeah, so that's
it
what.
needs to be a kind of a take turn.
Yeah, that's what that checking in process is there for. So if you go through the process, right, you're asking what's that like for you to hear, or are you open to hearing my side, right? You're giving a lot of room in the dialogue for both people to voice their side of the issue. And you do want to make sure you're moving slow enough that both people have space to respond to what's been brought up. So that is the idea, is that you move slow enough that both people get a chance to share. So we'll have about 5 minutes for you guys to get into this. I want to give you time to try it on. And I'll be available for questions afterwards. I'll be on the table in the hallway near the main speaking room. But just turn to a person near you and pick from one of the scenarios or choose your own. And you guys can actually try this out for yourselves. And encourage you to use your own language and find your own way to it. All right, guys, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Usually I run these as a 2-hour workshop, so this is a bit awesome. But yeah, usually there's a lot more space to explore and play with these concepts. I hope you guys got at least one useful trick that you're going to try in your next difficult conversation. That's my invitation for you. Just take one thing forward and try to put it into practice in your next interaction. And I'll be over at the table with the green top right in front of the...
Yep, yeah, exactly. There's a table over in the other building there. It says Ask the Expert, so feel free to chat it away.
Yeah.
There. Please,
I'll be over there. And yeah, here's my contact info, which is also on a card. So thanks everybody for being here. Really appreciate it.
thank you.